Snowpal. That's a dramatic shift from where we were a year ago, right? So to
Yeah.
all the developer naysayers who want to be in denial, so to speak, whereas, hey, you know what? I'm irreplaceable in the near future. That is not really the case because 70% of you has already been replaced by. Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Clive Dsouza, who's a senior software engineer. Hey Clive, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Hey, thanks, Krish. Yeah, so I can give a background about
Yeah,
myself.
yes, please. Yeah, if you could just give a brief intro about who you are, what you do, I think then we can jump right into the topic.
Okay. So I'm currently working for Intuit Credit Karma as a senior software engineer, and I've been in the IT industry for over 16 years now. So I've been working as a full stack engineer, some backend engineering, some front end engineering, and I've worked at major retail companies like Target, Lowe's, and I have a patent associated with myself. Yeah, I think that's the main experience I have.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah. So we can get started with, I want to talk about, one of the topics you had mentioned was the advantages of real-time server-driven web components. We can get started there, or if you want to sort of talk a little bit about your patent, you're welcome to do that. What's your
Okay.
preference?
I could talk about my patent first, just an
Sure.
overview.
Sure.
Yeah. So this patent was associated with Target. So it was developed when I was working over there. So I built the data collection tool for Target, and this was basically is being used by entire Target for tracking all their digital data on Target.com and other websites. So I built the entire tool from scratch. So basically, this tool would collect all the data from the front end, such as the page loads, the clicks, and impression events. And this would basically get sent to the backend, which would then send to Kafka. And we
So, Clive, sorry, let me understand. So you mentioned data, but it sounds more like metadata to me, right? It's not data related to what Target's actually selling. So I just want to make sure. So
yeah,
it's
it's a metadata basically, right?
okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we also use so this data was used by the analysts for recommendations and like data analytics, and they would basically query Kibana for that. So they were able to see the data in real time using Kibana. Yeah, this is an overview of my patent basically. I can go towards the next topic.
Okay. Yep. No worries. Yep. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I think you want to talk about the advantages of real-time server-driven web components. So if you could just give, sort of introduce our audience to what you want to talk about there, and then we can jump into and sort of dissect it, see what advantages this provides and what some parallel options might be as well.
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, I think I would like to give an overview of what is currently being done in like most organizations, and then I can talk about like
Sure.
what this is. So right now, like most retailers, if you go to their product details page, you will see recommendations, right, for a particular products. These are just like static components that get the data from the backend. They are not like real time. They are not using any like Gen AI or any data from the LLM.
So let's take actually, Clive. Should we take a specific example or even any example so people can follow along? So what would be a good example so we can sort of take that all the way through?
A simple example would be on, say, if you visit Amazon.com
Okay.
and you're visiting, like, you're seeing a particular product like, say, a desk chair or something. And
Okay.
when you scroll down, you would see like similar items to this, and
Let
you
me
would
act- let me
recommendation.
do a screen share. Right. Let's just see it as we talk so we can visualize this.
Right.
Okay. So I go to Amazon. Let's say I'm searching for, I don't know, maybe bottled water.
Right.
Okay.
And just click on, like, yeah.
Any of them doesn't matter. Okay. Click on this one here.
Yeah. And if you scroll down, maybe, yeah.
Are
Yeah,
these the ones we're talking about? This
these
this
are
is
some
a
of the,
sponsored list, I guess.
yeah. If you scroll down, I guess there should be some.
More details about this particular product, and then they have more sponsored
Yeah, yeah, these are
content.
recommendations. If you look at this, these are just like generic recommendations, and I don't know if you're logged in or not. Based
No, I
on
am logged in. Yeah.
Okay, so based on your like browsing history and like the products you have viewed, and like if you have used viewed a lot of like water bottles a lot. They have like tracking, data tracking that would show these products to you.
Okay.
And this
But
is just,
what do you mean by they're static? I want to make sure I understand that. You're saying it's sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So the components or the this like each product over here is just generated statically. Like you have like a generic
So are
component.
we saying by that, Clive, are we saying that no matter who searched for water, whether it's you or I, and doesn't matter whether Clive clicked on Essentia Water or Krish did, you're saying this list is going to be quite the same for the two of us, is what you're saying,
Right,
right?
right. That's what
Okay.
I'm, yeah. So the approach, what I'm talking about is the advantage is basically, so right now, these or this UI that is displaying each product or this frame or this component, that is basically just static. Whereas when you use a real-time server-driven UI like Next.js, the LLM will generate the component for you. So it will basically generate the code that will be displayed on this basically. So let
No,
me,
wait, Clive, just to make sure, right? And correct me
yeah,
if I'm wrong. With something like Next.js, my understanding was it's a server-side rendering framework. So as opposed to sending you the JSON and letting the UI construct, uh, you know, the DOM essentially, it is going to send you the entire HTML per se, right? That is the difference. So let's less about. I just want to make sure I get the terminology right. But when we say static, I thought it was the type of products that were actually showing up here, but that's not necessarily the case, right? Because in
right,
both these scenarios, the list could quite be the same. The only difference being whether this code was generated by
right,
the server or whether it was done on the client side.
right. It could be a mix of both also. Since we are calling an LLM, and the LLM input, input to the LLM would be your tracking data. So
No,
based on,
hang on. Sorry, where does the LLM come into play here? I just want to
yeah,
make sure. Okay, where does let's talk about it with and without the LLM, so I can get an idea as to where that plays a role.
right. So when you're loading the page, say this, for example, this page, right? And say it's built in Next.js. When you are loading it, you call the LLM with your data that you want. That LLM would respond with the server, the UI component, and also the product details that you want to display or the products that you want to display. So it would be based on, again, it would be based on your past history, like the products you have viewed, and a mix of your browsing history and stuff.
Okay, I probably let's talk about it a little bit more, right? Where does the actual let's talk pre-LLM versus LLM days, right? Can you walk us through what the actual difference is? Like if you took LLM out of the picture and you look for took the same example as me looking for a bottle of water and it comes up with a list of recommendations versus in today's world where there is an LLM that comes into play in the scenario, what would the actual difference be in the request response flow?
Yeah, so without an LLM, so for example, the example you showed me, right? So that would just be just minor details of a product. But if you use an LLM, it would have more details. It would be dynamics. It wouldn't be just like the product image, the product name, and the product price, but
Okay.
it could be something more.
Like for instance, what is that more?
It could be like something like more details like about that product,
Okay.
and also I think,
So are we talking about, let's make sure, are we talking about, let's say it came with a list of product options, right, as alternatives. Hey, if you want to buy this bottle of water, instead of Deer Park, you can possibly buy Fiji or something else. And you're saying with the LLM, you get additional sort of data about the product, possibly because it's going to go out somewhere into the larger world and get further details about the product that is not existent in that system, in the backend system. Is that what we're talking about, or?
yes, yes, so it would give you more details. And also, say for example, you have now, if you're creating like a static, say a React component, right? It would just have like a placeholder for the image, a placeholder for the product name and the price, and say the
Right.
add to cart button. But with the LLM generating the UI, it would basically, you can mix and match. You can add multiple things.
I see it. Okay, so so it's not LLM generating the UI, right? You have a piece of code in the backend that has an integration with some large language model, whatever
Right,
it is that relates
right,
to this. Now,
right,
and then using that, it generates a response which is dynamic, meaning what is rendered on the Amazon recommendations. You're saying that's not going to be the exact same structure. It's not going to be an image followed by a title or a description or a price. Your that whole look and feel of what is being shown could be very different each time that it's being shown. Is that kind
right,
of what we're
right,
saying?
right. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you know of an existing like a public product that we can actually see here that might be doing something? So which means if that given that that is the case, Clive, every time I make that same request for a product, what I end up seeing in the list of recommendations could not the variation is not just in the product itself, but in what it's showing about each of those products that you're saying could be quite different as well.
Right, right, right. I don't think if any one has come up with this, but yeah, yeah,
But I'm trying to think, but there's a certain real estate available on the page. I'm just trying to think how what this dynamic response could possibly mean because you cannot make it taller because if it makes it taller, then the page is not going to look quite the same. So what are we talking in terms of the response being dynamic? How different can it possibly be?
so we could increase the width, right? It doesn't matter how, it doesn't have to be like a fixed height or something, right? Like it could
But it's
increase or decrease.
I don't know. I'm saying if you have a product team that says this is how you want for the page to look, then it's not going to look that way, right? If it's going to be higher than 100 pixels tall, now it could be 200 pixels tall, for instance.
Right,
And also the data that you fetch for each of the products from this LLM that you're talking about, I don't know if it's going to return the exact same type of data for all of the products, right? What if it finds 10 lines of details for Fiji water, but for
right.
perhaps a less popular bottle of water? Hypothetically, if it had only 5 lines of details, then you're going to have a page that looks quite inconsistent, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that we would have to fine tune the LLM prompt basically, or like how to return that amount of
But
data.
also from a business standpoint, what does it actually give me as an end user? Like if I were the user of this end user in the system, I'm just trying to understand what is it actually bringing to the table.
Yeah, I think it would be more dynamic, and it would be more like as a user of the website, it's something like which changes every time, or which basically like seeing the product, not only the product image or the product like the price or something, but seeing more of the details in the recommendations would make me want to click that product and see go further into the details of that particular product. So it's basically like conversion of increase
You're
the
saying that
conversion.
there's a higher chance that people are going to
Yeah,
make that purchase versus them
right,
not making that purchase.
right.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. Anything else you want to talk? Yeah, I know I have a couple of other things I want to talk about, but anything else you want to talk about with this particular item?
I think this is the main thing that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So should we explore a couple of other things? Like I'm just curious to know, just a general set of topics. Should we just have a conversation about a few other items outside of this, right? The few things. Could you give us just so my question is more specific to what you do? What is the tech stack that you sort of work on?
Yeah, currently I work on TypeScript, React.js, and for the backend we use Scala.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you work on? Are you a full stack developer or you work on the front end?
I'm a full stack developer, but I'm more focused towards the front end.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you essentially on a daily basis you're using TypeScript and React essentially, right?
correct, correct.
So let me ask you some basic questions there. So I've done that work as well, TypeScript and React. Given the tools that are available, like say, my question really is the tools that you are using today to write this code. How different is it? Different from the set of tools that you used, like say 6 months ago or a year ago? And if they are actually different, how different are they? And what are the tools that you're actually using for writing this code?
So are you talking about like AI specific tools or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just getting there essentially. I didn't say AI, but that's literally what I mean. In other words, are you doing vibe coding? Are you using like Copilot? What are some of the ways you're helping yourself write this code? And how has that changed, if that has changed at all, in the last 6 to 12 to 18 months? In other words, if Clive were doing this job, building that feature 12 months before, prior to this conversation versus today, how does your development process look different?
Actually, it has changed quite a lot. Like looking back, say 16 months or 18 months back, I did not use any like coding assistant tools or something. So I had to write like unit tests by myself. I had to write all the React code by myself, all the backend code by myself. But this, like using these tools, has completely changed.
So what are the tools that you actually do use, like some of the tools that you use today?
Yeah. So I use Cursor.
Okay.
I've used a Client on VS Code. I used Firebender on IntelliJ a bit. But mostly I'm using like Cursor now, and I'm using like Claude Sonnet 4.5. That's the latest model I'm using. And so the most of my vibe coding is for like writing unit tests. That has helped me tremendously, because like we have like our application is huge. Like we have a lot of code base, and writing like for a particular feature, like we have to ship code very fast. But even when we have to ship code, we have to properly unit test our code. So for that, this these tools are really helpful. Yeah.
So that you talk testing. Outside of testing, let's say to write the feature in itself, how much, let's say if you wrote 1,000 lines of code earlier, how much do you actually have to see that you have to write today? And how much of the code is generated by Claude and these other models that you're using?
Yeah. Say, for example, 1,000 lines of code, I wouldn't rely on the tool to write the entire feature for me. I would say, for example, I would break it down into like mini tasks. Say, for example, I have like in this feature, I have this mini subtask, right? So I would tell, say, maybe Claude to, okay, I have this particular feature I'm working on, and this is the subtask I need. For example, I'm building just a generic example, a React component or something. So I'll give the description that I need to build this React
I mean,
component.
we talked about Amazon, right? Let's take that.
Right,
Let's say you're building a page that shows the details of a product, right? Someone searched for water. I picked one, I clicked that, and it showed me everything about the bottle of water. So
right,
let's say if you were building that as a feature today versus you would have done it in the past, I just want to get to what some of the differences are from a dev process standpoint.
right. So the product details page is very huge, right? It's a huge feature basically. So I would start with smaller components. So first, I would say I would build. Maybe I've built some of the components. I'm building like the details section, the product details
Okay.
section. So I would, and I think that would be a straightforward task. Like I would ask Cursor to basically say that, okay, create a React component that would display like the product details, and I want it to be in this format. It should specify the core product details and
So, which
some.
means, Clive, the big difference here already is prior to a tool such as this, you would have actually written that first or initial lines of code. Now
Correct.
you're not doing that anymore,
I'm not
right?
doing
That's
it anymore.
completely different, right? So it changes the whole approach to solving that problem. So you're basically doing prompt engineering using Claude or any of those models to saying, you know what, generate that, just get me started with those initial lines of code. So it's able to generate that code, right? Which is dramatically different from 12 months ago, 18 months ago, right?
Correct.
That's a drastic difference. Now, what would have taken several hours or maybe even several days in this case, it took a matter of minutes for that code to be generated, correct? So now let's say it generated that code. What would be the next thing that you do? Like in other words, you breaking it down into smaller pieces, that to me is agnostic to AI and these tools because you would have done that regardless as a developer, right? You would have taken a task and taken a story, broken that down into multiple tasks or subtasks or however, whatever tooling system you use for task management. I don't know if there's any difference there or is there a difference there? I mean, do you rely on a tool to break the task down or do you do that as a human yourself?
I do a mix of both. So I tell them like I tell the tool that I have these tasks that I want it to be broken down, and it would give the suggestions, right? Okay, these could be done, and
Okay,
these.
so which means even before the code is generated, the breaking down of the task into many subtasks is also done using the help of this tool, essentially.
Correct.
A
Correct.
tool, right? So it gave you a list of tasks. You sort of review it quickly. You figure out makes sense, it doesn't make sense, and then it probably you can have it integrated so it can even generate those subtasks by itself, right? You're not even going to Jira or a tool like a platform like that to typing it manually, probably the tool can do that too. So all of that time is saved. Now you've gotten a generic piece of code, Clive, that says here's how you're going to render a product and product details. What do you do from that point onwards?
Yeah. The next step is to check the code because I still don't trust the generated code completely. I would go to every bit, every line of the code and see if it is according to my expectations, if it's meeting the code standards, call it the code quality.
But would that be the next step, or would you actually see the rendered version of the page to
Yeah,
know? Yeah, right. I reckon you're going to do that before you did
correct,
this.
correct. Yeah, I would do that, and then I would basically check.
Because if it didn't generate the page anywhere close to what you wanted, then you're going to have to do some more tweaks to your prompts and how you're going to ask for those answers, right? Let's say you go through an iterative process and you come up with a version of the user interface that sort of looks like what you want. And then you go from there, right? And then you go. So you mentioned you don't trust the code. I mean, what do you not trust about what it generates?
Yeah, sometimes they could be like lint issues or some details where, say for example, it's not generating uh, a specific section in the product details which I want. It would just skip that entire thing and would just generate like the other sections. So I would have to tell it, prompt it again to say, tell it like, okay, you missed this section. I want this section to be
So
added.
where does okay? So let's go with this, right? I know we have about 8 minutes to go. I'm curious about this. So it generated a piece of code, and it looks, let's say it's 40% of the way there. Let me ask you for the number. In an example such as this, Clive, what do you expect? How close do you think the generated code is going to be to the end version? I'm not talking about just the quality of the code per se, from a functionality standpoint. Let's say we did not care to look at the code at all that we cared was like in college, right? Just looking at the end product of, hey, does this thing do the job or does it not do the job? How close do you think that this code would have come? Is it like 60% of the way there, 70%, 20%, 40%? What would be a ballpark number you would associate?
Yeah, I think from my experience, it all depends on how you prompt the tool. Generally, it gave around 60 to 70% of the
Wow,
right.
that's a big number, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
those initial conversations, quote unquote, you had with the tool and the LLM, the Claude models that you were using, it gave you 70% of what you wanted. In other words, even if you were a non-developer, right? Let's say the two of us were not developers. We were a product manager, I was a tester, or I was a salesperson. Up until that point, you didn't need a developer, correct? The 70% of the code was generated. So does it mean that you didn't need a developer at all for the first 70% of what was done?
right.
Okay, so that's a dramatic shift from where we were a year ago, right? So to
Yeah.
all the developer naysayers who want to be in denial, so to speak, whereas, hey, you know what? I'm irreplaceable in the near future. That is not really the case because 70% of you has already been replaced by, if we took this conversation, even if with a grain of salt.
Right. But again, I would like to reiterate that it all depends on how you prompt the model. Just say like if I just type in, okay, generate me this the product details, and that's it. So
But what if I took a screen grab? Let's say your product team or a UX team is going to give you a user interface, just a mock up, right? I'm not even going to type anything. I want to take a mock up. I want to take a screenshot of that, stick it in this, right? Ask it, hey, you know what? Here's what I want for you to generate for me, right? So it's less about miscommunication. Oh my God, let me stop this center stage. It's just freaking out. Yeah, so it's less about, I'm just taking a sort of few different examples. One is I can take a screenshot and ask for it to make sense out of it, right? So there are tools that possibly do that, right? It takes a screenshot, it says, you know what, this is what you want. I'm going to use the libraries and the frameworks and the version numbers that you want for it to happen. Or say you do a prompt, you have a set of prompts and it gives you something. Outside of the quality of the questions that you asked from a prompt engineering standpoint, Clive, what I'm trying to say is a non-developer could have very much done the thing that the two of us as engineers are talking about thus far, correct? You didn't need to hire an engineer to get to that point in the code base.
right, right.
So
Yeah. So
go
it would
ahead.
generate like the basic whatever you've provided in the screenshot, right? Like in the UI or the design. But I've seen the code that it generates is, again, I mentioned like it's 60 to 70% there. It's not completely there. Like there would be some misses and hits with the
Oh, no, no,
styling.
I'm not denying that at all, right? All that I'm saying is before we go to the next part of our conversation, I'm saying that we seem to agree that 70% of what needed to be done by a developer does not need to be done by a developer anymore. So
Right.
if I had a team of 10 developers to get a bunch of things done as a product team, if 70% of the work can be done by non-developers, then I don't need 10 people anymore. Can I say that I only need 3 people in the team?
That's a tricky question, but it depends again on uh,
Or what would you say, Clive? Let me rephrase the question, ask you. If you had a team of 10 people,
right.
and without these tools, and you now are going to, you have the liberty and the power to actually restaff this team, how would the composition of the team change if you were to restaff that same team of 10 developers, given that you have access to these tools today? How many people do you think you might want in that team?
It depends on the amount of work we have.
No, the same work, right? I mean, you have a number of things to be done. You had
Right.
10 people in the team. You didn't have these tools. You didn't have a generator. You couldn't use Claude for code generation, but you have all of these tools at your disposal today. So going from 10, how many do you think you would actually have in the team?
Probably, I guess 7.
Okay, so you're saying it's only a 30, it is still a sizable number, but you
Right.
still think it's a 30% cut, not so much a 70% cut of the
Right.
team size.
Right. Right. Because every engineer would have to know how to write prompts, basically how to use the tools.
That's
That would,
not terribly hard, is it? I mean, it's
yeah,
okay, right?
yeah.
I mean, can I say that you could get somebody who's out of high school to get that job done? I mean, do you need a college degree to do that?
Oh, no, you don't. You don't.
Okay, so it changes the. I know we got only 1 minute. I have a lot more to ask you. Do you have time or should we just wrap it in the
I have
next two
time. I
minutes?
have time. Yeah, I have
Uh,
more
Tell me
minutes.
how much time do you have?
Maybe another 10 minutes, I guess.
Okay, let's go for another 10, right? Okay, so because this is interesting, right? To me, this is important because every day, we had the highest number of layoffs in the US, I think, from an engineering standpoint, I think in the month of October. I don't know what that number is, but it was a pretty big, fat number, right? When I just saw the news the other day. So I think the nature of engineering and the workforce and the composition of teams, would you agree that and the team composition is going to look dramatically different 12 months down the road than it does today, than it did 12 months ago?
I think yeah, it would be actually. It could change. But again, like with all this, it depends upon the organization. Like if they are heavily into AI and if, yeah, it's all depends on each organization actually.
I mean, I don't have to be heavily into AI, right? I can
Right.
just get a $20 subscription on GitHub and get Copilot, right? I'm not really saying that the team has to do anything more, and they just get those licenses, which cost $20, $50 per ticket or per seat, and give it to your team, right? Then you're already equipping your team with what's needed. And if you agree that that is going to be the case, I want to know what the composition of a team you think might look like. Let's say you have a development team, a product team today, a sprint team with 3 developers, 1 tester, and 1 project manager who's part time, maybe 1 DevOps engineer who's part time as well in this sprint team. How do you think that composition might change going forward? Because you don't need all of them, certainly.
It depends though. So again, we could keep the same amount of people, but the workload would be more. It's like instead of having one feature with the use of these new AI tools, we would be developing 10 features and we would be keeping the same number of people. So that
Right,
could be
which is kind of the same thing, right? Ceteris paribus, you know what I mean? What I'm saying is either you build more using the same number of people, assuming you do want to build all of those features, which you might very well want to, or you actually have fewer people do it. So before I get to the next leg of this topic, my thought process at least. So I guess we both agree that the teams are going to be a lot smaller than they are today, correct?
right. Right.
Okay, and in terms of the composition, what I mean is, Meta, I think Zuckerberg had mentioned that the need for junior engineers at Meta has diminished quite a bit, where they don't find the need. So people getting out of college are going to be in a slightly interesting position where the need that you had for fresh grads is not quite the same anymore. So the composition was going to change, where you had maybe 1 junior developer, 1 mid-level engineer, and 1 senior engineer. Maybe now it's changed to perhaps just maybe two mid-level engineers, or maybe one senior engineer. So which means the whole composition of those teams is going to look very different as well. I mean, are you seeing that happening today, or is it only something that you see happen in future?
I've been seeing with all the layoffs and stuff. I don't know. I have not much idea about like how many engineers have been laid off. Were they like entry level engineers or like engineers in other levels? But I do see like in the next few months or in the next year, a team would be mostly consistent of like just mid level to senior engineers. But yeah, it would be tough for fresh graduates or fresh entry level engineers.
Okay. And then talking about some of what you do, right? You mentioned TypeScript and React. One thing is to use AI and all of these tools and models to make yourself more efficient, right? So you're churning out more code, you're writing less code and getting more done in the same amount of time, and yada yada yada. But the other part of it is, are you sort of your end the outcome, the end product of what you're actually creating? Is it still the same type of code like TypeScript and React code that you would have generated or created or written 12 months earlier, as opposed to today? Or is the end product of what you're creating looks very different as well? That I want to know. Tell me if the question's unclear, but I want to know if the end product of what you create ends up looking identical to what you might have done yourself as a human 12 months ago. It's just that you're able to do that faster today using these tools, or has the end product itself changed by virtue of what's happening in the industry?
The end product will definitely remain the same. It depends, right? Again, on your product team, what they want. It has to match what they want, right? So if you're using a tool to generate a code that renders something, that has to match what is in the design. Like whatever tools I've used to generate the code, it is the same. It's just that the code quality has improved. Like we are writing more unit tests.
No,
So
I'm going to come to code quality in a second. Let me
yeah,
rephrase what I'm trying to ask here, right? If I go to Amazon.com today versus I did 12 months ago, my experience as an end user hasn't changed a whole lot. I still go into the search box, I type, it gives me a list of results. I go into each of them, see if I want it, I don't want it, I look at the reviews. So the whole interface is quite dated if you ask me, right? I don't know how different it looks today than it did 12 months ago or 24 months ago or 36 months ago. But I don't see that as the future of Amazon.com. I just want to get your thoughts on it, because maybe Amazon, I'm sure, is doing things very differently and more efficiently to get to what they're doing, right? But
right,
from an end user standpoint, my experience has not changed any bit, not that I can think of at least. But
right,
that probably is not going to be the case 12 months, I hope, down the road, because my whole interaction with Amazon dot shouldn't look anything like it does today. I mean, do you see that as the future, or do you actually think Amazon.com, or I'm just taking that as an example, that it's going to actually look very similar to what it does today, meaning the end user does not actually tell anything that's changing behind the scenes?
yeah. So AI, Amazon has been using AI for a while now, right? And they have been shipping. I guess they have been shipping features with the help of AI tools. And seeing ahead, I don't see any like visual changes on the website or any website basically who's using AI to generate their code.
You're saying you don't expect any changes?
I don't expect major changes as such because just imagine like after a year you're going to Amazon.com and like the website is completely different. I cannot see that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I guess I don't know how what the time frame is, but my hunch is that it's not going to look anything like this, right? It's not going to look anything like this because, see, so far, again, this is my speculation, just based on past experience and whatnot. The user interfaces are going to become a lot more conversational interfaces, right? How they're going to be and what it means to each of those products and the industry they support, I don't know. I mean, it varies, but I cannot see why it should look the way it does today, because I want to be able to have it because, we have our own product as well, which is a project management tool, right? Snowpal.com. We built this a few years ago. So it was built the way you would have built project management platforms, let's say a couple of years ago. But
Right.
someone asked me, Krish, if you were to redesign this today, how much of it would look like it does today, right? How different would the new product look? And there's no hesitation for me when I said that it would look 100% different. It better be 100% different, because otherwise, there's going to be a big gap between us as engineers using AI to make our lives better at work but not passing on that benefit to the end user. So the end user experience, in my mind, has to change dramatically. But based on what you're telling me, you're not expecting those changes. But in your interactions with, say, UI, UX teams, Clive, are you seeing those teams think dramatically differently, somewhat differently, or are they thinking exactly the same way that they did 12 months ago when they go to design these pages?
They are thinking differently. Like there's a lot of changes wherein, okay, you have a page, you want to add like Gen AI capabilities wherein the user can chat and talk, basically talk and ask questions regarding a particular item on the page. It could be anything, it could be retail, it could be finance, or
Right.
any kind of a website. So I agree it would change, but from the user input side, like you mentioned, right, for your product management tool that you'll have building, it would be more conversational, right, instead of like a generic static page
Yeah,
where.
you go to a dashboard and you actually, the onus right now is on the user to interact with the platform. I think in my mind it should be the other way around going forward, where the onus is actually on not the user but on the tool to figure out what the user might potentially want to do at this point of time, and so sort of guide them and help them do those things much faster. Just like we see increased productivity as developers, there should be increased productivity as end users. So your session time goes from you being on Amazon.com for 10 minutes to find whatever it is you're looking to find and place an order, to maybe like 30 seconds or 45 seconds, because the whole approach was so different and so convenient. Now you've saved yourself like a whole 9 minutes of your interaction with the platform.
Right, that could be done, but I don't see, like, for a major retailer like Amazon.com, it would take a while to go to that,
Okay,
but like maybe a smaller retail website, they could do that.
fair enough. I think we've come to the tail end. Any questions you have for me before we call it wraps?
No questions, but it was fun talking to you. It was an interactive conversation, and I like speaking about.
No, thank you very much. Again, folks, Clive Dsouza, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts about, AI and how it has helped you become more productive as a developer. It's just some of these questions are just not my curiosity. Talking to a lot of people have similar questions, perhaps related to the roles that they play in their organizations. I was just trying to share them with you here. So much appreciate your time, Clive. Clive.
Thanks a lot, Krish.
Bye bye.
Bye.